Aloha kako. Like I said, you know my name, the name of those kupuna come from this aina mostly, hamakua, a bit in Hilo, a bit in Keokaha, some from Oahu. I was born and raised on the island of Oahu. My father, Jonathan Jamaica Heoli Osorio, is a Hawaiian activist, musician, and professor. And I'm going to talk to you guys about iakaikapoliopele a bit today and aloha. Do you guys want to come closer? Can you guys hear me in the back? Okay, cool. About 10 years ago, I started researching into a mo'olelo called iakaikapoliopele. And at first, I was really interested in what Hi'iaka had to teach us about women's power, manawahine, and activism, and how I saw so much of Hi'iaka and Pele in people like Kaunanike Trask, and people like Mililani Trask, and people like Havane Rios, and people like Auntie Maxine, right? That I saw this connection between the way we were in our mo'olelo and the way we were on the front line protecting our sacred aina. Slowly it became clear to me that I wanted to look into something a little different. What is it about these mo'olelo that teach us about aloha? What is it about aloha that is so distinct from this thing we call love? How do we learn about aloha from aina? How do we learn about our behavior and how we show intimacy with each other from aina? So I started reading this story. I went to see a kumu of mine, Lili Kalaka Me'elehiva. I told her I wanted to write about sexuality, right? Because obviously, like, not the straightest person in the world here, right? So I wanted to learn more about what my kupuna had to say about that. She said, go read Kamo'olelo Hi'iakaikapoliopele. Look for a wahine named Hopoi. And I was like, Hopoi? I never heard of this woman named Hopoi. Raise your hand if you've ever heard of Hopoi. You guys dance hula? All of you? Yeah, okay. So most people who who aren't obsessed with mo'olelo, if they know Hopoi, it's because they're hula dancers. Because Hopoi is one of the beginnings of hula, right? There's Laka and Hopoi. And probably others. I'm not a hula practitioner. So I said, okay, shoots. I'm gonna go look into the mo'olelo. I'm gonna go find Hopoi. So I'm gonna tell you a bit of this story. Raise your hand if you're somewhat familiar with the mo'olelo of Hi'iakaikapoliopele. Okay. Hi'iakaikapoliopele is a story that was published in our Hawaiian language newspapers over at least 14 times between, well, the newspaper started in 1834, but I think the first published version is 1861. And when the newspaper stopped in right before the 1950s. The first thing you need to understand is that our kupuna understood the need for a vast collection of stories to tell one mo'olelo, right? So I have an English degree. So in the Western literary tradition, there is an authoritative version, and then all the others are adaptations, right? But there's one true version of the story, right? That's where we get the idea of history, that there's this timeline, this one version of what the story of history is. But in a Hawaiian understanding of the past and story, that doesn't work out so well. We use the word mo'olelo to describe the story of Kamehameha and the story of Pele. We understand them to both be a certain kind of oia i'o, a certain kind of truth that we can carry together. We can say that our islands were created by Papahana, Moku, and Wakea. They were also created by the Kumulipo. They were also created when Maui fished the seas out of the island. So when people ask you, did you guys come from the Kumulipo or Papua and Wakea or Maui, you just say yes. Right? All of them, all of these mo'olelo fit into our greater understanding of who we are as a people. Because of this, we call a version of a story mana. We all know what mana means, right? Power, spiritual power, authority, right? So we have to understand that the more mana, the more versions a story has, the more mana, the more power a story has. So 14 versions of Hi'iaka published in the newspapers, this story has a lot of mana. And these versions are very different. And depending on the version you read, Hi'iaka Pele and her ohana travel from Kahiki looking for a home in Hawaii. In some versions, she leaves because she's beefing with her sister Namaka Okahai, who's a mo'o, right? Mo'o and Pele never really get along in these stories. In other versions, Pele's older sister, Pele Kumuhonua's older sister, Pele Kumukalani, has stolen her kane, and now she's on a journey to find her kane. But it doesn't really matter why she leaves Kahiki or Hapakuela. She leaves and she comes to Hawaii, and she lands first in Nihoa and Kaula, and she moves her way down the island chain, creating lua everywhere she goes looking for a home, right? And this, again, our mo'olelo not only teach us about aloha, they teach us about maps and how our aina was created. So on Oahu, you see Le'ahi, Diamond Head, right? That's Pele. You see Puʻuhuluhulu, that's Pele. You go to Kauai, you see Kilauea on Kauai, that's Pele. So on and so forth. Maui, Haleakala, of course, Hawaii Island, Kilauea, Hualalai, all of these things, right? These are all part of Pele's mo'olelo. Pele eventually comes to Hawaii Island. She's tired. She says, I want to take a deep sleep. I'm going to run out of time for this story. So what part do I want to tell you? She takes a deep sleep. She goes to Kauai. She finds this really handsome man. That's really all he is. He's handsome. His name is Lohio, literally the slow one. There's not much good about him except that he's got like a six-pack and he plays the drums. He can bang a drum real well, right? Right? Okay. So Pele follows the sound of this handsome beating man all the way to Kauai. This man is pounding his drum with his aikane. Kawakahiapaoa, yes. The metaphors matter. Pele is the most beautiful woman of Hawaii. Lohio is the most beautiful kane of Kauai. Of course, they are destined to not marry because Hawaiians, there was no marriage back then. They become kane and wahine, right? You need to understand that in the Hawaiian dictionary, Pukui and others will tell you that kane means husband and wahine means wife. I am here to assure you that that is not what that means. Kane means intimate male partner and wahine means intimate female partner. They do their thing. They stay with each other until morning, 3 days. And Pele's like, okay, I'm cool now. I'm gonna go back. Lohio's like, but I love you. And she's like, I love you too, it's cool. I will send someone to come get you, don't worry. But he's like, but I cannot survive without you. She's like, I know, I will send someone to come get you. While all of this is happening, Hi'iaka has traveled down into a place called Ke'au. And she's walking down Makai and she sees the most beautiful thing she's ever seen in the world. This woman levitating on the sea. She's dancing hula, literally levitating on the skin of the water. And she's drawn to her. And it makes sense that she's drawn to her. I'll tell you in a minute why. So she comes down and she says, Hui! Ovaila oi! Who are you? Tell me your name so that we can be made aikane. I'm not going to define aikane for you. I'm just going to keep giving you examples and explain to you what an aikane is. Tell me your name so that we can be made aikane. So this woman comes up to her and she says, oh, the name I am known for is Hopoi because all my friends see me gathering opihi in Hopoi. But the name I was given by my family is Nanahuki, right? To pull the glance, right? So we understand that Hi'iaka is literally pulled by Hopoi's name down to sea to her. And so they become aikane. They go visit Hopoi's home. They surf together on the water using their bodies as surfboards because real surfers don't need boards, according to Hi'iaka. They are aikane. As Pele is coming back, Hi'iaka feels in her na'au that she is being called. So she tells her beloved, aikane Hopoi, I have to go and complete a journey for my sister. And I will be gone for a while. Oh, I forgot the most important part. After they become aikane, Hi'iaka creates an entire forest of lehua for Hopoi. Just like, boom, here's a forest of lehua out of this just there. Here's a kipuka. The lehua becomes Hopoi and Hopoi becomes the guardian of the lehua. So she's both the physical manifestation of lehua and the kia'i of that place. Just like we are the physical manifestation of our mauna and the kia'i of this place. Aye, okay. So she tells her, I'm gonna be gone for a while. Hopoi says, I could go with you. And Hi'iaka says, but my journey would not proceed properly. You must stay. And she says, don't worry, I will protect you. Stay away from my sister. She gets a little lili every once in a while. She's got a lot of fire in her, but I will kawoha her to malama you. Dehoni, Hi'iaka leaves. This is the last time Hi'iaka sees her Hopoi. She comes to see her sister and her sister says, first, her sister's gone to all the other Hi'iaka sisters. Oh yeah, so there's at least 8, maybe sometimes 40 Hi'iaka sisters in the mo'olelo. Iakaikapoliopele is the most beloved because she was carried in Pele's bosom in an egg form. So they're like almost the same person. All the other siblings who are older than Iakaikapoliopele refuse. They're like, hell no, there are mo'o out there are steep cliffs, there are men who we don't like. There's no way I'm going on this journey. But of course, as the punahele, as the youngest, Iakaikapoliopele has a certain kind of kuleana. So she says, of course I will go on this journey for you. I will go ki'i ke la kane a kākou. Who here speaks Hawaiian? Okay, so what is kākou? All of us, right? Pele describes Lohio as that kane of all of us. It's really intentional, right? So we know that Hawaiian pronouns aren't gendered, they're relational. She could have said, go ki'i ke la kane a'u, like go get my man. She says, go get ke la kane a kākou. This is the first thing we learn about pilina in the mo'olelo of Iakaikapoliopele, that to take on a kane is to share that intimacy with all that you are intimate. This both is metaphorical and physical. Like she literally tells Hi'iaka, I'll sleep with him first and then we can all have him. Right? So it's both the like, we're accountable to him, but then we also get the pleasure that comes with it. So the first thing you learn is that as our upena of intimacy, our upena of pilina stretches out, your possibility of pleasure and responsibility increases, right? Because you can't have pleasure without responsibility. We understand that. That's what kuleana is. Hi'iaka says, okay, I will go on this journey for you. I will take on the mo'o. I will do all the things, but you are not to harm my beloved hopoi. You are not to send your fires down into her ulu lehua. You can have all the other aina we share, but that shall remain kapu to me. And Pele says, yeah, of course, whatever, it's fine. Hi'iaka goes on her journey. So now Hi'iaka has an aikane, right? Let's keep track. She also has a kane in Lohiau, right? Because Lohiau has an aikane named Kawakahiapaoa, that's also a kane to Hi'iaka. If I had a big whiteboard, I'd like draw out the web of intimacy that's happening here. She's accountable to them all, and they are accountable to her. On her journey, she meets this young woman. Her name is Wahine O'Ma'o, really well named. Wahine O'Ma'o, the green woman. She's kind of green. She's cute, you know the girl. She's cute, but not a lot of experience. Hasn't really been around the block, but like she's down, ready to join the cause. Okay, so stop. Okay, so she meets Wahine O'Ma'o, and Wahine O'Ma'o says, tell me your name so that we can be made aikane. So what are we learning about aikane? The first thing, tell me your name so that we can be made aikane. She says, oh, my name is iakaikapoliopele. It seems like you have an offering for my sister Pele. Here, go take her a black pig, come back. I'm really rushing through this story. Eventually, Wahine O'Ma'o comes back and becomes an aikane to Hi'iaka. Really important for the rest of the story, Wahine O'Ma'o refers to Hopoi as her aikane. They've never met, but she keeps asking Hi'iaka, tell me the story of how we came to be aikane with Hopoi. How we came to be aikane with Hopoi. She shares this grand aloha for her. So she tells these stories on, and then on her way off to Kauai, right, because that's where Hi'iaka is going, they come to a place in Kailua. Anyone been to Kailua on Oahu? Yes. Fresh water, beautiful women, beautiful men, nice waves, good times, lots of lu'au. If you ask Kaleo Manuiva, he will tell you that Kailua is the only place in the world where Hi'iaka fell in love with Kane. Whatever, everyone strays. So Hi'iaka comes to Kailua. She meets a man, a chief named Ka'anahau, the famous, beautiful chief of Kailua. And they have this little flirtation. Ka'anahau digs an imu, cooks lu'au, and cannot satiate her. Gives her lu'au, she eats it, still hungry. Gives her lu'au, she eats it, still hungry. Gives her lu'au, she eats it, still hungry. On and on and on, all the way through the night until morning. Right? Okay, good, we understand. And then they, of course, lay together. The next morning, Wahine O'Ma'o says, in what might seem like an act of jealousy, she says, well, first Hi'iaka gives off this chant saying, Ku'ukane of this place of Kailua, Ku'ukane, Ku'ukane, my kane, my kane, my kane, showing her aloha to him. Wahine O'Ma'o was like, whoa, 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 whoa. If you're gonna act like this, ina pela ko hana, perhaps it is best if I leave. If you're gonna leave my bones to rot along the side of the road, perhaps you and I should not be taking this journey together. And when you read this for the first time, you're like, oh wow, Wahine O'Ma'o was jealous. Even though there's no rule of like monogamy between them, right? She's jealous, what's going on? Hi'iaka quickly, like no problem, says, well, no. I gave that chant because I could see that Pele was not happy with me for taking this time, ho'omanavanuing, with this kane, right? So this was a chant to her. Do not be mistaken, he kane a kaua keia. He is a kane to us both. And then Wahine O'Ma'o was like, oh, okay, cool. Literally, that's like there's another line and then they go on their journey. There's no problem. The problem was her pronouns, right? That she was saying, he is just mine. He's not in our web, right? And when Wahine O'Ma'o challenges that and says, wait, where do I fit into this equation? And then Hi'iaka says, oh, sorry, I was unclear. He's in our upena. Everything's pono again, and they can continue along their journey. The other thing we learn from this mo'olelo is that when Lohiau is explained to have been sleeping with Pele, let me read it. It's really beautiful. When Lohiau sleeps with Pele in the beginning of the mo'olelo, so this is a creation story. And one thing you can expect to see in a creation story is lots of sex, right? Because that's how we create things. I'm just saying, we're all adults here, except for those of you who brought your children. Okay, so But what you don't see are descriptions of people's bodies. And some people might tell you, you know, our kupuna used kauna because the missionaries are watching us and we didn't want them to know how like super sexy and awesome we were. I don't believe that. I've read too many of these stories. I've read too many descriptions of aloha between Kanaka and Akua and Aina to believe that. So when we describe Pele sleeping with Lohiau, we say, "Ua ike o Lohiau I kanani o puna, ua honi I ke ala o ka hinano, ua mukiki ka waile hua o pana ewa, ua lei ia hoakale, ua inu I ka wai ko o lihilihi, ua kaani nau I ka vili vai, ua eha I ka eha lima ole a ke aloha. Aloha wale puna, aina paia ala I ka hala." So it says, Lohiau witnessed all the beauties of Puna, not of Pele, of Puna. Inhaled the fragrant scent of the hinano, sipped of the vailehua of Panaewa, laid in like that garland scent of aloha, felt the pains of aloha, and then it names like these different places, right, in Puna, and these different experiences you can have with aina, not with a body, right? The same thing happens when Hi'iaka sleeps with Lohiau, with Ka'anahau. Ua ike I hola o Hi'iaka I kanani o Kailua, ua ho'opapa I ka opu makapeke o ka wainui. So Hi'iaka sees all the beauties of Kailua. She grasps the o'opu. You guys know that song, o'opu nui, teve, teve, right? O'opu, okay. Little tidbit, when a song talks about a fish, it's not talking about a fish, right? Okay, cool. She stood under the beautiful shade of the makale tree and the strength of the makale that stood erect. Ua ehako, she felt the pains of love and was enswirled by desire, right? They're not talking about their bodies, they're talking about aina. We learn that to love someone, to be intimate with someone, is to share your aina with them, right? So a lot of times we talk about aloha aina as this political thing, right? That we're here as aloha aina because we love our country, because we love our aupuni, because aloha aina is patriotism. I want to challenge us to think beyond what America teaches us about what it means to love a country and what it means to love a people. Aloha aina is not patriotism. Patriotism is like this thing that our kupuna, we didn't really dabble in that. Aloha aina is this magnetic force. This is what Navahi says. Aloha aina is the pull of a magnet that draws you completely and flush to your aina. And when it does that, aloha aina recognize aloha aina in each other, and they are drawn completely together as well. So aloha aina maintains two relationships: love to the land, love to each other in this upena. So that when I say aloha is not straight, I'm not just saying aloha makes room for people like me who aloha love other women. I'm saying that if I love you, I have to love the aina to love you, right? So literally not straight. I love the aina, then she loves you for me, right? We love you together. So when I love someone here, I love the mauna to love them here. It has to go through the mauna because this is where we are. And therefore, our aina becomes the apu, the carrier, the hands that will hold all the aloha we have together. This happens, Hi'iaka continues her journey to Kauai. What happens when she gets to Kauai? Anyone know? What's Lohiau doing? No, he's dead. He's so heartbroken, he died. But yeah, no, yeah, I mean, but he could have been getting down with someone. Maybe he got down a little bit with his aikane, Kawakahia Po'oa, but then his grief was so intense that he died. Damn, Lohiau. So of course I'm Hi'iaka, and I'm like, damn, I gotta like revive this dude. So she does all this stuff, she brings him back to life, and he's like in love with her now, and Pele, right? Because get room for all kinds of love in the Kino, Hawaii. Because aloha is not a pie. Can we say that? Aloha is not a pie? Awesome. Our people didn't even eat pies, okay? So my aloha for someone does not at all take away from my aloha from someone else. That's not how aloha works. It's not a, yeah, anyway, anyway. So she revives him, they start returning back to Hawaii Island, and as she does that, Hi'iaka names all the places they passed, and she says, "Mai poina o ia'u," to all the places, Ha'ena, Lihu'e. One by one, she names them, their winds and their rains, and she says, "Mai poina o ia'u," do not forget me. Remember the journey we had together, the cold nights we spent together, the hot afternoons, kau kalai kalolo, right? Over and over, "Mai poina o ia'u, mai poina o ia'u, mai poina o ia'u," in all these different succeeding chants. We learn here, again, another part of aloha aina. One, to be a kama aina to a place is to know intimately the nature of that place, to know its names, to know the way that the water moves differently in a bay like Kailua versus Waimanalo, right? Like, we trust kama'aina like watermen to like know their water specifically, right? Because they know that water, it is their family, they know the way it moves. They can tell when a riptide is coming before it's even there. So Hi'iaka is demonstrating that as she comes back. In fact, Wahine Oma'o asks Lohiau, what are the names of these places? And before he can even respond, Hi'iaka lists them all. And he says, wow, you have made me a stranger to this land in your knowledge of this place. You have made me a stranger. You have made a malihini of me in your demonstration of kuleana to this place. So we learn that to be a kama'aina is to always be on call, to always have to demonstrate the way that you know your place, to always have to demonstrate your kuleana, to always be ready for the ho'opapa, right? So if I say I'm a kama'aina of Kailua, I better come correct knowing the winds and the rain names. I better understand the way the tide moves. I better understand like where the good soil and the bad soil is, right? Because otherwise someone's gonna be like, you're not a kama'aina, I know all this stuff. That's how it works. So they're on their way back, and Hi'iaka sees, after she's told all these ainas not to forget her, all these aina that she loves not to forget her, she sees fire billowing above Ke'au. And she knows for sure that her aikane has been killed. Pele has sent her lava down into the lehua fields. And she's pissed, right? I mean, I didn't tell you most of the story where Hi'iaka's like kicking butt against all these different mo'o who are coming at her. But she's gone through a lot. She's even revived this dude she's not even that into. All for her sister. So she kind of curses her sister and she says, okay, whatever, I'm not gonna sleep with Lohiau right now. I'm gonna go all the way back to Hawaii Island. I'm gonna sit on the edge of Kilauea and I'm gonna take our kane there. Kind of feisty, yeah? So she does that. She goes back, she sleeps with Lohiau at the edge of Kilauea. Pele is pissed. It's unclear why Pele killed Hopoi. She thinks Hi'iaka's taken too long, or she's mad that Hi'iaka slept with Ka'anahau, because she wasn't actually supposed to sleep with anyone when she was on this journey because, you know, desires of the flesh can be distracting. But in any case, Pele's mad, Hi'iaka's mad. Pele sends the younger Hi'iaka sisters to go kill the older Hi'iaka sisters to go kill iakaikapoliopele and Lohiau and Wahine Oma'o. And what you have to understand is that in the beginning of this mo'olelo, Pele is described as the ali'i of their lahui kanaka. The Pele family is a lahui in the same way that we are. She's the leader. She's the mo'i. And Pele's right to rule, her mana to rule, comes from her intimate relationship with her constituents, her lahui, her ohana. So long as that relationship is pono, she can rule. Here's the problem. She sends her younger sisters to go kill the punahele, the youngest, and their kane, and they don't believe that that's pono because it seems as if Pele started this war. And so Pele's right to rule is challenged. Her mana to be the leader, to be unquestioned, is challenged. What we learn here, right? Leadership is a relationship, not a position. It's the reason why when Ige strolls in and we sit there and we show him respect, because that says more about us than it does about him. It's the reason we don't think of him as a leader. He does not have a pilina to us. He has not spent enough time to have a pilina to this place. He doesn't respect the fact that there needs to be an intimacy between us, a conversation, and aloha, right? He doesn't have the mana. Pele is losing her mana here because she's disrupted their relationship. And the Hi'iaka sisters recognize this when they say, "Wahemo kapikola." The umbilical cord has been cut between us. And when that happens, their pilina is severed, their relationship is damaged, and so is her mana to rule. So the sisters come down and they say, "Hi'iakaikapoliopele, we've been sent to kill you. We've been sent with these fires to kill you, but we're just gonna throw little sparks because we believe our sister has wronged you. Wahemo kapikola." And so they do that. They throw little sparks, and everyone would have lived, except Lohiau can't seem to follow the instructions of a strong, powerful woman. She says, do these chants, these hulihia chants, and you will be saved. And he's like, nah, my gods, Kanikavi and Kanikava, they're like, I should do these dude chants. And she's like, okay, whatever. So he does this dude chant, he dies a little bit. She's like, you ready? He's like, no, I got one more. He does the dude chant, he dies a little bit more. She's like, you ready now? He's like, no, I'm gonna try again, and then he's dead. Whatever, Lohiau's dead. And now Hi'iaka, of course, is mourning Lohiau and Hopoi. In some versions of the story, Wahine Oma'o was also killed in that segment. So Hi'iaka now doesn't have an older sister, doesn't have an ali'i, and her ali'i is the aina of Kilauea, so she doesn't have a home. Her beloved aikane, Hopoi, has been killed. Her kane Lohiau has been killed. Her other aikane, Wahine Oma'o, has probably also been killed. So she goes on what we call she starts this thing called a na'oawa, which is a journey of grief so powerful that it often results in suicide. So she leaves Kilauea. She vows never to return. When she does this, Pele feels this great emptiness inside of her, which makes sense. She literally carried Hi'iaka in her bosom in an egg, almost like as a mother to Hawaii. And the two of them are so deeply connected that to be away from each other is a great trauma to them both. And for Hi'iaka to be away from Kilauea is a trauma to Kilauea. So Pele finds the one person who might be able to convince her to come back. She revives Wahine O'Ma'o in the versions where Wahine O'Ma'o is dead. In the versions where she's not dead, she just goes to find her. And she says, you need to go retrieve your aikane, Hi'iaka. And if you convince her to return, I will spare you both. And Wahine O'Ma'o was like, well, this is like a win-win for me because I either need to die with my aikane or I can bring her back and we can be together again. So she's like, shoots, I'll go. And Pele's like, okay, go take my brother, Keowahi Maka Akawa. So they go together and they find Hi'iaka. And Wahine O'Ma'o was like, come on, it's time to go home. I understand. You're here mourning hopoi. You're in grief, you're in pain, but we have to go home. And Hi'iaka's like, I ain't going home. That's not my home anymore. Pau already, lava. So Wahine O'Ma'o, who's never been much for words, much of a chanter. In fact, most of the story makes fun of the fact that she can't come up with a chant. Poor girl, she's not a poet. She's a ride or die though, let me tell you. Like, I did not respect Wahine O'Ma'o the first couple times I read this story. When I started reading it in Hawaiian, I was like, damn, Wahine O'Ma'o got game. Like anyway, she's cool. So she turns to Keowahi Maka Akawa. She's like, well, that's it. She's not coming. I can't convince her to come. Keowahi Maka Akawa says, remind her of all the places you've been together. Recall the names of the bitter rains and the chilling winds, the waters, the oceans. List the names for her. So Wahine O'Ma'o is inspired for the first time in the entire mo'olelo to write 8 sequential oli. And she offers them one by one. The first one begins, and I'm not an oli person, I should know these oli, I should be able to tell them to you, right? That's a part of this story. I should have someone, I should learn it myself, but if not, I should have someone here who could just give you that ea. But she starts by saying, Ku'uai kane I kala o laloe. That's the first chant. And then she lists the names of the places they went together, the pains and the struggles they endured together. And with each chant, Hi'iaka just a little bit more, is a little bit ready to come home, each one. And it isn't until, the mo'olelo says, until every place has been named and none remain, that Hi'iaka says, E ku'uai kane, I see you. I recognize this immense and deep pilina we share through all the places you have named. I remember the chilling winds, the cold rains, the nights we spent terrified of what was to come the next morning. I recognize that through the places you name. I remember our aloha through those places. Those places return that aloha to me. And she says, I will return home. This is important for a lot of reasons. Today, I don't have to tell you this, right? Today, more Hawaiians than not have been removed from their aina, right? I mean, how many of us live on the aina that our kupuna lived on? 2, okay, so I'm gonna cry. If aloha aina is both the way that we create a strong lahui, right, a strong nation, and the way that we love each other, and is learned from our land that we are intimate with, and we are removed from our land, then we are cut off at the legs. We cannot conceive of a strong nation without that relationship to that land, and we cannot conceive of healthy relationships if we are cut off from our aina, right? Hi'iaka only returns and recognizes the depth of her aloha because they still have a connection to aina. So I want us to think about what that means. To stand in the malu of our mauna that has been violated at least 13 times. Aye? That the state of Hawaii and international investors has decided because she's been violated 13 times, one more time, no matter. What kind of backwards American, I'm not allowed to swear here and all I do is swear back home, but what kind of backwards American fallacy is that? This idea that the more you've been violated, the easier it is to do it again and again and again, when our kupuna know that to be violated in that way, in any way, recognizes a need for a sincere reconciliation. So I want us to think about what it means for our aloha with each other, for the pilina we're building here with each other in this space, and the way that we make this mauna sacred when we stand for her. In what ways we're building a lahui in that, as we come to be pili with this aina. So I will tell you that at least 10 generations of my family lived in the malu of this mauna. And I did not. So I will tell you that when I was growing up and my father sang the song For the Beauty of Mauna Kea all the time, I didn't understand why he loved this mauna so much. I came to this movement as someone who was invested in sovereignty, in ea. So I was against the telescopes, one, because of desecration, but also because I believe we have a right to determine for ourselves where things are built, how things are built, and who builds them, right? But I didn't have an intimate aloha for this place. I didn't know this place. And that's a trauma that I carry by being removed. Because my father, right, taught to participate in capitalism in a certain way, saw his path to take care of his ohana, taking him to Oahu. So I was removed from the malu of Mauna Kea. So I did not grow up knowing the love you can share with a mauna like this. So what happens when we come here, those of us, especially those of us who this is our aina kulaiwi, we come here face to face, nose to nose with the summit of Mauna Awakea, and we lay our bodies on the line with this place. What kind of nations are possible when we practice that pilina and we hold it in us? I also want us to think about how, I talked a little bit about the way this upena of intimacy works, how we can carry all this aloha at once. Some people in this movement worry that maybe they shouldn't be here because they're not Hawaii Island people. That maybe they didn't grow up here, or maybe they don't have any ohana from this place. But I want to challenge that narrative and say that it's never too late to come to a place like this carrying your own mauna, ka'ala, your own craters, ka'o crater, that's my crater, right? That's where I grew up. I can carry that with me in my na'o, and I can still look at this mauna and develop a deep and intimate aloha for her, and her for me, and that we can see each other as mirrors. And then when I see her and she sees me, I can also see her in the people who gather with me. And that's why this mauna is sacred, right? It's sacred for all those reasons. It's a high peak, right? It's where our kua are. It's a vulnerable ecosystem. It holds our precious water. But for me, it's sacred because we are standing with her. Because of the pilina that I've developed with all of you in a very short time in this place, she becomes sacred because she creates aloha. Just by being here, she creates aloha, right? And if aloha aina is nationalism, then that aloha will help us create our nation. And so that is something we have to protect more than anything else. We cannot desecrate the mauna, but we can also not desecrate the way that we aloha each other. We need to take that seriously. I've written a lot of poems for the mauna this week. I might just read them. Okay, cool. One last thing, because I don't know if I've made this clear, because when I talk to people like this, I black out, and I'm not really sure what I've said today. It's a good thing people are filming it. I can watch it and see if I made things up. The reason I'm so invested in telling this story in this way, and understanding that there are thousands of ways to tell this story, and I was actually really afraid to tell this mo'olelo on this aina with the people who have been here this week. There are far more, in my mind, qualified people to talk about Pele and Hi'iaka. A lot of them are sitting over there, right? And they will talk, that's the thing, is they won't talk about Hi'iaka, they'll dance about Hi'iaka, right? They'll chant about Hi'iaka, they'll sing about Hi'iaka. But I need to tell this story in this way because to me there's something missing in our movement, and it's growing, and I see it growing here, but there's been something missing in our understanding of Aloha Aina, and that we're so fixated in an important way in our relationship to this land, but not enough fixated in the relationship we have with each other, and the way that we can celebrate these different, diverse, complicated relationships that we have with each other, and that is hard. Heteronormativity is powerful in that it sustains, now we're getting really like big words, right? But it like sustains a certain kind of patriarchal standard that countries like the United States thrive on. And it helps support things like capitalism and extractive capitalism and tourism and all of these things. It's powerful in that way. It's also powerful because it is simple. It is not complicated. It is far easier, I will say this, it is far easier to have one straight partner of the opposite sex and to participate in a way that's kind of been written down and has all these rules than it is to say, what is it, all the things that I need to feel and be love, and how can I feed that love into others and allow that to overflow into others and allow that the people I love will love other people in ways that maybe they don't love me, and that's okay. don't know where the hell I'm going with this, but that we have to pay closer attention to that. And we have to make sure, I say this as someone who in 2000 and, I don't know, 14, 15, whenever we were talking about same-sex marriage, and honestly, I'm not that big of a fan of marriage anyway, but I'll tell you that as a Hawaiian, it was really difficult to watch that debate because I saw a lot of haole who maybe did not understand me as a Hawaiian saying same-sex marriage is a civil right that all people should have. And then I saw a lot of Hawaiians who like, I'm Hawaiian first, last, and always, saying that this is a sin against Yesu, or that same-sex marriage, this is a quote, violates our traditional notion of ohana. I'm here to tell you that Pele says, first of all, marriage has nothing to do with ohana. That's what Pele says, not me. That's what the mo'olelo says. Marriage has nothing to do with ohana. But also same-sex desire does nothing to desecrate our understanding of ohana and aloha. And I think we need to take that more seriously as we come to places like this and we see that the definition of aloha expands and changes, and we see that the vision for what our nation can be expands and changes. Do not be fooled. What we're doing here right now is self-governance. People all around the world have always been telling us, what are you guys going to do when you're sovereign? You guys can't lead yourselves. And that just further justifies the way that our lands have been taken away from us, our power has been stripped away from us. But look at us. I have never seen anything like this in my entire life. I'm not that old, but still, in my entire life, never have I seen organizational feats like this. We have, they may not have palapala, but we have civil engineers here, we have urban planners here, we have doctors here, healers here. We have everything we need. And if this doesn't teach you that, if that's not the real lesson of this movement, then we are not paying close enough attention. Yeah? Okay, so I'm gonna read some poems. Unless, no questions? Okay. These are all love poems. Frontline pilina in the malu of the mauna. It's Wednesday and I find myself standing in the shadow of mauna that loves me like islands emerging from the sea, like a sky scattering herself in stars, like a lahui kanaka growing. I'm standing in the malu of a movement that captured a generation's heart and attention. I find myself here, my body, a kipuka expanding into Pele's pa-hoi-hoi grip, holding my quiet. In the silence, I hear her wailing. It's Wednesday, and I find myself without searching, arms linked in a line of women I barely know, but was destined to love. A line of women stretching back for thousands and thousands and thousands of generations. Pole turned light, turned puko'a, turned slime, turned gods in a time of mere men. Who more fierce than these bodies of islands, these bodies of women, these moku turned aina spilling into our sea of islands, these hands stretched out feeding a generation accustomed to starvation. It's Wednesday and I'm holding her arms like I am holding this mo'olelo, strong but tender enough to let both breathe deep. I am praying to be a wahine worthy of this moment, worthy of these hands holding me right back. And then Auntie tells me, we are the generation they always dreamed of. So it's Wednesday, and now I am weeping. And every kupuna that ever fought, ever cried, ever died so that we would know for sure how to stand is singing right through me, and somehow I am still standing, arms linked in a line of women holding me. And all I have to offer them is this story that is incomplete. Cool, that's one. I've never read these out loud. So sorry. Oh, thank you. Mahalo. Mahalo. The Mauna's the legend. I'm gonna tell you guys something for real. So some of you guys saw the poem I did on the front line over there, or maybe you guys saw the video up there. That's the last full-length poem I've written. I wrote that poem in 2015 after our hoa were arrested on the last stand on the Mauna. That's the last full-length poem that I've written. And since being on this Mauna, I've written like 6 poems. So think about what she's teaching you and what she's trying to say through you, right? So some of us are visual artists. I've seen all kinds of beautiful visual art coming out of this. Some of us are mahi'ai, and this will inspire us to grow new food for our lahui. But there's something about her and all of you that pull this out. Okay, I'll read a couple more because we have time. Ask me about the Mauna, and I will tell you about 30 Kanaka huddled shivering in an empty parking lot praying the lahui would answer the call. So, hold on, actually. this is the part that blows my mind. When we came here on Friday, there were literally 30 of us, maybe less than 30. This parking lot is unrecognizable to that time. Many of us slept literally on cots under the stars. We didn't have any tents set up that night, no structures. The next morning we woke up, there were maybe 50 people. The next morning we woke up, there were 100. The next morning I woke up, there were 300 people here. The next morning, and then we chained ourselves to a cattle guard, and the next morning I woke up, there were 1,000 people here. Then our kupuna stood on Wednesday, were arrested. The next morning I woke up, there were 3,000 people here answering the call. You guys think about the kumulipo and the way that aina is created out of nothing, out of darkness, and then light, and then slime, and then puko'a, coral, full islands. That is what we did here. 30 people huddled in a freezing parking lot, offering oli to an ahu that was just pohaku. I don't know how many people are here today, but to me, if that's not growing and birth, and not what this aina here, Hawaii in particular, this lava is all about, I don't know what it is. So ask me about the mauna, and I will tell you about 30 Kanaka huddled shivering in an empty parking lot, praying the lahui would answer the call. I will tell you about 2 nights caught sleeping directly under a sky scattered in stars, an air so clear that every inhale is medicine. How every morning I woke to a lahui growing as if we were watching maui fish us one by one from the sea. Ask me about the mauna and I will tell you how on the 3rd morning I watched 30 become 100, then 100 became 1,000, then 1,000 became us all, each and every one of our akua standing beside us. Ask me about the mauna and I will tell you the mo'olelo of 8 Kanaka chained to a cattle grate and the kokua that sat beside us. How we were never alone in the malu of the mauna, how no one is ever alone in the malu of this mauna. Ask me, and I will tell you about the hands I held through the blistering cold and extreme heat, how I learned love from the subtle tilt of her temple pressed against mine, or the solemn promise in her eyes, how the evening before I braided prayers into her hair, hoping they would stay there. Ask me, and I will recount their names, all 33. Kupuna, one after the other, who showed us mo'opuna how to stand, how they stunned and activated a lahui with their sacrifice, how I wept and wept and wept as I quietly held their names in my chest. Ask me and I will sing the song of our manawahine, all 100 of us, linked arms and unafraid, who stood in the face of a promise of sound cannons and mace. Ask me and I will tell you how this body has been changed. How home takes on a new meaning these days, how family shows up at exactly the right time and place, and how silence is a clarity that cannot be bought. And I will say, I have been transformed here, but won't know the words quite to explain. I will say, I am not quite sure who exactly I'll be when this ends, but at the very least I know this aina did everything it could to feed me, and that will be enough to keep me standing. Yeah, that's that. Cool. Okay, I'm only gonna read one more. They're all like the same poem, I'm realizing. They have all the same words. This one's for Auntie Maxine. So yesterday, 2 days ago, I asked Auntie Maxine, okay, so I'm teaching a 3-week class called Hawaii Politics, and the whole class is supposed to be about activism and social movements. The class is on Oahu. I missed the whole 2nd week because I came up here. I was supposed to go back this week, and then I told my students last Thursday, I was like, I can't leave. Will you come see me? They're sitting over here. Some of them are in the back. And one of the great feats of our movement is that we found in like less than 24 hours, we found enough money and miles to bring them all up here at 0 cost to them. But so then I needed to find something to do with them. Now they're here, up in my space. Just kidding. I'm so happy you guys are here. So I asked Auntie Maxine, will you come talk to my students about koho'olawe? And she did, and she blew our minds. Yeah, she blew our minds. So I wrote this poem for her, but when I wrote the poem, I was also thinking about people like Auntie Loretta Riddy, Auntie Terry Keko'olani, who's back home on Oahu, Auntie Haunani K. Trask, Auntie Lily Kalakame'ele Hiva. These are the aunties that I'm really pili to, but of course there are dozens of aunties here that you're pili to that fill the same image. So I do this poem specifically for Auntie Maxine, but also all of our aunties, all of our kupuna wahine. Auntie says she climbed a 90-foot cliff in the dark, traced the scars of a long forgotten waterfall, cried as she felt the green disappearing under her fingertips, and I learned that aloha is courage steeped in mourning. Auntie says this arrest bond is the most important paper I own. She holds it out like a certificate of her lineage, and I learn to be born Kanaka means to take pride in this fight, means to understand the polity of our bodies. Auntie says, malama ko kino, says don't take no fucking shit from nobody. She said that, so that counts. Not even our own men. And I learned that there are so many violences that will come for me, too many to count, too many to turn to metaphor, too violating to write into this poem. Auntie says she sees hope in me, and I watch her overflow. Says she dreamed of this day, and I learned that genealogy is a promise to take your place amongst your greatest heroes in your mo'olelo. Auntie says, I love you, and I stand in her shadow expanding, and every fear in me evaporates, every doubt casts aside, every whisper that does me no service is carried away, and I become something she dreamed I could be. I become an auntie too. A mauna, my mo'opuna will stand in the malu of. That is all. No questions, concerns, poems? Yeah, Mikey.
First of all, that was all beautiful. I was wondering, you were kind of opening with this, but what did you personally learn about yourself after studying that mo'olelo?
Yeah, so I don't talk about this a lot because I get emotional. I know, what a jerk, right? Okay, so
It's my job, sorry.
so I grew up in like a really, what I conceived to be like a really Hawaiian environment. I went to Hawaiian immersion school. I spoke Hawaiian half time at home with my dad. I spent time in a lot of things like nothing this big, but like a lot of stuff like this growing up. And yet still felt really ostracized, wondering if I was Hawaiian enough because of the way that I loved. Because I didn't see examples of myself in my community, not out in the open anyway. Not a lot of other Hawaiian women fiercely loving other Hawaiian women out in the open and in celebration. And I don't know if I hoped or expected to find that when I returned to Hi'iaka, but that's certainly what I found. She changed not just my relationship to my story, but she changed my relationship to my body and to my aloha and to my relationship with my lahui. And I think a lot of the powerful thing about stories and why I'm obsessed with them, and that's all I do is like read and teach stories, is because I think every part of us is a story. And the stories really like set the foundation for how we see ourselves and how we behave and what we build. And a lot of the stories we were told growing up didn't come from us, you know? Like, I think the first movie someone gave me was Snow White. And I remember being so excited. It was like my brother's birthday, and I got a present even though it was his birthday. You know, when you're that young and they have to get you presents too. Snow White. And then I remember growing up on other, like, you know, Disney stuff, and that told me a certain story about what it meant to be a woman. And all of that was white, of course. But then even in my own Hawaiian community, there wasn't space for this other way of being a wahine, which is why I tell everyone I desecrate womanhood all the time in celebration. But going back to our mo'olelo, I think what's fascinating and important about that and telling our children these stories and telling ourselves these stories is that there are so many mirrors in them for us to see ourselves in ways that are unapologetic. And I can say this body, the way I present myself and the way that I love fiercely and intentionally and in a way that overflows is not something that makes me like weird or different or outside of my Hawaiianness. Like, I can see that in Hi'iaka. I can literally see myself in Hi'iaka in all the ways that she loves. Even the like revenge against her sister, like all of it. I'm like, I'm here for it. And so I tell this story because I know that there are other girls like me, other young wahine like me sitting around, even if I can't see them, and I can usually see them, even if they don't know who they are yet, who are like looking for this story. Even if they don't know, they're looking for this story. And I think about what it would have been like to grow up knowing this story in this way. Because there's enough trauma and violence coming for us, right? I didn't have to feel that violence from within my own Hawaiian space. Like, what would it have meant if I grew up in a place where we understood this vast, expansive definition of what a wahine was? And I didn't have to ask if I was a wahine too. And that's what the mo'olelo gives, always, is a mirror. And it mirrors you by showing you the aina. I want to really thank you guys for being here. Like I thought nobody was going to come, but I really, really appreciate you folks being here. Not just right here, right now, but being here on the mauna with us and allowing me to be here with you, especially those of you who live on this island now. It's a great honor to stand with you all. And I know some of us are going to be coming and going because of our kuleana, and some of us plan to be here for a really long time. And I just hope that if you're coming or going and I'm coming or going, that we come together again someday. And we continue to build OEV structures and OEV governance like this, and that we remain committed to this even when our mauna is safe, even after we've decommissioned every single telescope on this mauna. That we continue to come here and remember the story of this place and remember each other when we say mauna awakea. Aye? Ku kia I mauna. Ku kia I mauna. Ku kia I mauna. Ku kia I mauna. Mahalo. See you guys. Lunchtime.